Parents of Reddit, what is the weirdest thing you caught your children doing? Packing turds into cardboard tubes with toilet paper and hiding them under the sink. She called them poop bombs. There was like 10 of them under there. Caught my 2-year-old son licking the floor. He seemed really into it. A little girl I was babysitting was slowly stirring her bowl of chocolate ice cream into mush. I asked her what she was doing, and she replied very seriously, "I'm making poo poo for God to put in people's bottoms." I saw my kid, who was 4, in the backyard looking for bugs or worms. He grabbed something and put it in his mouth. I asked him about a few minutes later. He said he ate a worm. I laughed and asked why. He said he wanted to know what it tasted like. So I asked what did it taste like. He said it tasted like mud. The next day I asked him if he really ate a worm. He replied yay in the most defeated and embarrassed way any human could. "Ya live, ya learn, eh?" When my son was 3 years old, we noticed the smell of burnt plastic coming from our heater vents. I called one of our friends that worked in heating and cooling and he came over. Our furnace was in our crawl space, so he went down. About 15 minutes later, he asked me to hand him 3 black garbage bags through one of the vents, so I did so. He came up later with 3 bags of plastic toys. I had wondered where all my son's toys were going. I asked my son why he was putting toys down the vents. He said, "Mommy, there are alligators down there and if I don't feed them my toys, they will eat my sister." When my daughter was little, old ladies would come over and enthusiastically ask her simple questions, like "What's your name?" and she would always reply in flat monotone, "Birthday cake." Then they'd ask another question like, "Oh, well, how old are you?" and she'd say, "Birthday cake." They would look over at us with great concern. So annoying. I woke up to my 5-year-old spraying Windex on the window beside my bed, cleaning it thoroughly, then nodding at me and moving on to cleaning the windows in the next room. I still don't know what the hell was happening. Edit. She told me before bed that it needed cleaned so her cat could look out. The bottom of the windows gets smeared because the cats push their faces against it, so she wanted it clean for them. When my son was about 3 years old, he liked to wash his eyebrows with my facial cleanser. Just the eyebrows. Wet, lather, rinse, repeat. He said it made them nice and soft. Let's see. My daughter was drinking strawberry milk and then spitting it back into the cup so she could drink it again. I had hosed off a tarp and it was drying on the patio. We went outside and she just stooped down and took a drink out of a puddle on the tarp. Just today I was in the garage and she came out, instantly grabbed a toothbrush I used to clean car parts and stuck it in her mouth. I don't even know anymore. I caught my twins in 1st grade measuring each other's Ds with a tape measure they got to measure their heads in 1st grade for bike helmets. I walk in after their baths and one is on his back with his legs the air. Of course my husband said, "That's not something you do until high school." My youngest daughter was about 18 months old. She had, about a week before, discovered how to climb out of her own crib. Also, about a month before, she had once taken off her own diaper, not a repeat event but a one-time thing. My Mill was visiting us, and we were all slow to wake up. Around 7:30, the baby monitor alerted me that my daughter was awake, but happy and content in her crib. I let my wife sleep in, and I grabbed a quick 5-minute shower before going to grab her. When I got there, she had put the 2 pieces, climb out of crib, and take off diaper, together, and used them to repaint her room. I will never recover from the trauma of the smell. When my brother-in-law was 3, he was so obsessed with a toilet plunger they had to buy him his own so he'd stop grabbing the used one. It was his best friend. My mom caught me bringing eggs from the kitchen into my room and sitting on them in a blanket nest, hoping they'd hatch. What she didn't catch was that I had been doing this for a while and would put the eggs back into the fridge when they wouldn't hatch after a few days. When my son was about 4, he was playing in his playroom. I was on the couch and heard some sounds behind me. It was just us. So I turn and see my son looking up at the light fixtures and whispering. I ask what he's doing. His response, "I'm asking all the light bulbs in the house to not fall and kill you. Thanks son. He's truly got my back." Not a parent, But when I was a kid I used to prefer to poop in the park closest to my house instead of at home. I used to wonder who cleaned up my poop every day because the poop was always gone by the next day. After months of doing this I found out a neighbor mom was the one who kept cleaning up my poop. I was mid-poop one sunny afternoon when I saw her walking towards the park from her condo across the road with a baggie, probably because she had a chore every day that included going to the park to clean up my poop before her children could go play. I was squatted atop the playground in one of those wooden cubicles at the top of a slide peering out through a crack between the wooden pillars, watching the neighbor mom coming closer, trying to finish my poop at a rapid pace. I finished my poop, didn't wipe, because I was a disgusting child pooping in a park, yanked my pants up and flew my poopy ass down the slide and booked it through the field to home base, raced through the door and continued to live my best life until there was a knock on the door. My mom answered the door and to my horror there was neighbor lady and she and my mom had a long talk and outside on the front step. When my mom came in she looked at me with pure disgust and said no more pooping at the park. My older brother's friends were over and overheard my mom scream that at me. They demanded to know the whole story. Then when I started kindergarten, one of the children of the poop picker upper neighbor mom was in a grade ahead of me and recognized me and told everyone what I had done. I was and always will be the park pooper. Edit. I did not have a very good childhood. I should definitely clarify that. I have no explanation other than I was probably neglected. For those wondering, it happened in the 90s. Thank you for the awards. Packing peas from our garden up her nose. This required a trip to the local hospital emergency room, where the doctor, a dad of several young children himself, thought it was hilariously funny. So my wife and I were laughing as well. My 3-year-old's first joke was hey look at my armpit and she would point at her armpit and laugh. She would do this over and over. They warn you about first steps and first words but first joke? I am a proud dad. Edit. Thanks for the gold. I'll give my daughter a gold star tomorrow. My brother decided he wanted a pee hat, which is literally what it sounds like. A hat he could pee in during the night. While already a stupid idea, since he didn't empty it, he chose a plastic hat with hole in it. Edit. It was a toy construction hat with 2/4 holes in the top, meaning his makeshift toilet has 2/4 holes for the pee to leak from, and he was keeping it in his toy box. When my son was 3, he had night terrors for a few months. At least that's what I suspected. I was really concerned. The most unsettling thing he did wasn't waking up sobbing though. Sometimes he would wake up around midnight, walk to where I was, stare at me and then walk back to bed. He wouldn't respond to me and just sit on his bed while staring at the ground. If I tried to comfort him, he would become angry and violent. Next morning, he'd be his normal self. At that time he would often ask if ghosts were real. We never exposed him to anything with that sort of content. I'd try to reassure him that they were just imaginary. He would insist that they were real. Sometimes at night he would call me to his room and say someone was there. I was freaking out a little, not just by the idea that my child was seeing strange shit but that he might be suffering from psychological issues. My wife insisted that this wasn't something to be concerned about. She's a psychologist and I respected her opinion but I just couldn't stop worrying. I felt like I needed to help my kid. How? It became less and less frequent and stopped altogether for the most part. He still asks about and insists that ghosts are real from time to time, but he isn't scared at night anymore. Not a parent but when I was younger I caught my sister etching on the carpet. She hadn't had an accident and a little bit ended up on the carpet. She was full on etching on the carpet. Needless to say my parents weren't too impressed. I was the child. I was in my backyard and noticed there were a lot of slugs around since it had been raining. I was concerned that they had nowhere to go and they would be stuck outside where they would drown in the rain. So I went to the garage and got a bin and went around collecting every slug I could find. Then I got the idea to make it into a miniature city. I put in water, muff sticks, etc. And it became a project of mine that I maintained for weeks. Well, one day my mom walks outside for whatever reason and finds me holding a bin that's just full of slugs. She made me put them back and hose the bin down. I was pissed I lost all my hard work. Not a parent, but my little sister used to do pretty weird stuff. She used to lay over the side of the couch so her head was upside down and drool spit down her face until it filled her nose. She said that it would go through her nose back into her mouth like a circle. My son licked my toe. I asked him what he was doing, and he said time traveling. He was 3. My boys share a room. They were about 2 and 7 at the time, and I walked in their room and found them rocking on their hands and knees singing "We're the Wee Dudes." I have no ducking idea. Found my kid talking to the hole in the sink when he was 2. Turns out that's where he said God lives. Carry on. Yeah, weirdo. X's eldest hoarded cardboard tubes. If asked, they were simply for later. The youngest adopted and formed a strong emotional bond with a garlic for about a week. Not my child, but I've caught my sister doing multiple strange things as a child. The 2 most notable were, I once caught her playing with a bag with yellowish liquid inside when she was 10. She had pulled this bag from the side of her backpack. I asked her what it was. It was her own pee. She had been keeping it in there for days, and once in a while she'd pull it out go play with. I was horrified. When she was 8, she cut off her doll's hair, dismembered it and gave it a funeral which she made all of us attend. She went to dig it up several days later, but it wasn't there. She's done many other things, but those were the 2 weirdest things she did. My daughter had her door locked, which is odd. I gave her some privacy for a while, but then I got worried, so I made her open the door and she was watching a political debate. She was 13. Edit. This was dial-up days, so probably not porn lol. I used to sleepwalk when I was younger. I once walked downstairs and locked myself in a closet. My mom woke up to me screaming downstairs in the dark. I was like 4 years old. Hanging out by the pool. Our son, 7 at the time, had a eating grin on his face and he's giggling with his arms up on the side of the pool. Kids are weird, so we didn't even think twice. Finally, after like 10 minutes of us just chatting with him in this position, he excitedly announces, "Hey dad, if you stand here and lean against this jet it feels real good. Come try." I spit my drink everywhere, stood up, and walked off so I didn't die ducking laughing in front of him. I totally abandoned my fiance to deal with that and just watched him try to keep it together through the window inside. It was phenomenal. Now we have to keep an eye out and shoo him away from the jet when we notice him lingering. Kids are gross. I threw up in the hallway once when I was a kid because I couldn't make it to the bathroom. I told my parents in the middle of the night and went back to bed. I was 4 at the time. I heard my dad say, "Did she say she threw up last night?" About a second later I heard him fall. He said, "Yep," and I just fell in it. Upon hearing that, my preteen daughter tried to escape home via her bedroom window. I spoke up to her. I showed her how easy it is to just walk out the front door. I'm not a parent, but my niece was very upset that her older sister wouldn't turn the TV over when I was babysitting once. After about 10 minutes she pretended to be interested in the washing machine that was on at the time and sat in front of it and watched it like a TV. For an hour and 20 minutes. Her older sister watched the rest of her film but obviously wasn't enjoying it. She was outraged that her little sister was having a great time watching wet clothes spin round and round. It's the most creative act of revenge I've ever seen. 1. Coating himself in the entire bathroom in an entire brand new industrial sized garlic powder from Costco. 2. Having a snow day with his friends after unzipping the giant beanbag chair. My mother was horrified at the many drawings of coffins floating down rivers I made for her in preschool. She literally cried at the thought a child could do something so morbid. I only drew them because my mom and I watched a magic show on TV a few weeks prior that was so cool to me at the time. The magician locked himself in a coffin and went over a waterfall and came out at the end perfectly unharmed. I didn't get why she was so upset at something so amazing. I am 22 years old. She still tells this story to her friends. 80s kid here. For those of you who didn't live in the dark ages, there was this heinous medicine called methylate. It was a mercury-based antibacterial agent, often bright pink or bloody orange in color, whose cap had a plastic rod dipping into the medicine as an applicator. One morning before my parents had woken up, probably 1983-ish, I was wandering about the house, tripped and skinned my knee on the floor. Being the big boy I was, I went under the kitchen sink and pulled out the Windex. It had the same applicator inside that the methylate did, and I spent the morning dabbing window cleaner on my skinned knee until my mom came into the kitchen and saw what I was up to. There was another such early morning of little me hijinks in which I was alone in the living room after the adults had an evening of beer and board games. They left the table pretty much as is when they likely stumbled off to bed. I came along and figured this was my chance to be like the big people. I pulled a cigarette out of the pack and sat there sucking on the filter while having conversations with myself and moving the sorry board game pieces around. My mother again came out, saw this, and started cracking up. Few years ago the cinnamon challenge was a thing. Walked in the door to my son with his head under the kitchen faucet gulping and spitting water. He accidentally grabbed the cumin instead of the cinnamon. Kid 1. Teaching herself to knit. I awoke at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning and she had half a 3D bear knitted. We owned no knitting needles. She was 8. Kid 2. Eating inedible things. Examples. Lotion. Age 7. Silica packet bead. Age 16. No reason except curiosity. Caught the same kid rubbing her nose on her pancakes because it felt good. Kid 3. Headstands. Unassisted. Beginning at 11 months. I made the mistake of freaking out when I walked in and saw her in the crib with her feet in the air and she thought it was hilarious. So she's continued to hone the skill. My oldest son was about 3 or so and was using one of those play kitchens. He had a little pot on the stove and, since I wanted to be an engaged mother, I asked him what he was doing. I'm cooking baby Jesus. He had indeed taken the baby Jesus figure out of one of my mother-in-law's nativity scenes and had put him in the pot to cook. Not yet a mother, but I am the oldest of 4. When I was in high school I had a bathroom in my room. Very important to specify. It wasn't my bathroom. You just needed to go through my room to use it. That said, one day my youngest brother, probably around 6 at the time, was pooping and being young had no shame so the door was wide open. I walk into my room to see he had taken all of the cardboard tampon applicators out of the trash can and built extended fingers with them. I could not stop laughing as I told him to take them off. My mother caught me licking butter from the box. Still remember the look of absolute horror on her face. When my son was first learning to talk my mom kept saying just wait until he learns to say no. Like, really building up the anticipation. Well, I opened my eyes one morning to my beloved child, 3 inches from my face and staring at me. As soon as he sees I'm awake, he loudly and dramatically whispers no. I still feel like he was letting me know that whole phase had started. I was the son. When I was about 7 years old I started to develop an interest in ants. So I came up with the idea of having an ant farm. I got a shovel and took the sod out of my backyard in a circle around 4 feet in diameter. I would dig little holes in this plot to reveal and confirm that there were indeed ants there. Upon discovering the ants I would get the sort of bricks that had holes in them and plant them in the ground so the ants had a place to live. I then was not satisfied with the number of ants on my farm. There was the old, rotten tree stump adjacent to my ant farm, where I subsequently tore it apart. I had seen ants crawling on it previously, in search of more ants. I would literally just grab ants and let them crawl on me and then carry them to my ant farm to transplant them. I did this for probably 6 more years. And let me tell you, I had a ton of ants. I found my son and his cousin absolutely coated in calamine lotion. They'd obviously found it. Being 4 and 6 years old, they decided to do a bit of finger painting with it. I get that, but I don't entirely understand why his pants were off. Yes, his D had calamine on it too. Being that it was the 90s, I do have a hilarious picture of them posing together with their Cali body art. Caught my 5-year-old son smashing his privates between the toilet lid and seat. Also have a 3-year-old son that needs an audience while he uses the bathroom and he'll often start laughing BC he has no DBC he's pressing on it to try making it an innie. Kids are weird. I know this is going to be hard to believe, but I caught my 14-year-old doing multivariable factoring in his bedroom. I thought he was sleeping. Completely caught me by surprise. Toddler was making soup in a kitchen pot. Comes up to me and says, "Taste, mama, it's pea soup." and I take a pretend spoonful and say yum. Tastes good. And then she goes, oh, I have to make more, and puts the pot on the floor and squats over it and pretends to pee in it while making a psssshhh sound. Pee. It was pea soup. Don't have a kid, but apparently me and my sister were younger. We found some ashes and decided to pour them down the air vent on the floor. The ashes were my grandparents' pet dog. When I was 7 or 8, my mom gave me Benadryl before bed. Later, when she went to the kitchen to get water, she heard this noise behind her and found me standing butt naked on the couch. She put me back to bed and all was fine until the next day when she found I had also peed on the floor in the bathroom. I have a friend whose child, 4F, is perfectly normal and a fun kid, but for no reason and with no warning will banshee wail at a pitch I could not fathom before hearing it. It is the most terrifying, heart attack inducing experiencing when you are relaxed and not ready for it. I'm sure she is just voice testing etc, but duck me, it's not good. Just gave my son a piece of bread I made while he was watching a movie on the couch. About 5 minutes later, I walk over. He's got the bread in one hand, his wiener in the other, just munching bread watching Clue. When I was a kid I learned that hairs had roots and figured it worked like the roots in plants. So for a while I would pluck hairs from my head and try to plant them on my fingertips. I don't know why I wanted to grow hair on my fingertips. Just thought it was weird and funny. Anyway, I had to explain what I was trying to do one day when my mom walked in on me staring at my fingertips with hair stuck on them. Okay, so this is a story from my mother. I was around 3 or 4 years old and I absolutely hated wearing clothes. We lived out in the country, so she just let me run around naked. One day she comes outside to catch me sitting on the windowsill pooping. She said I told her I was a rabbit. When I was 9 and my little brother was 5, he really rustled my jimmies. My mom allowed men to watch him for an hour or so while she went to the store. Our next door neighbor knew, and if I needed help to go to her, as brothers do. We get into an argument and I ask him if he wants to play a game to calm down. He said sure, and I told him to sit in the rocking chair. I ended up tying him up in the chair with duct tape and said good luck getting out. My plan was to do that for a few minutes and then let him out. You know, teach him a lesson. I turned around and my mom is standing behind me and goes, what the hell are you doing? Untie your brother. My brother and I laugh about it to this day. 3-year-old daughter would dig through the garden or under backyard objects to find pillbugs, would lice and then bring them to us when they rolled into a ball. My wife and I would feign interest and tell her that they would stop rolling up into a ball once she left them alone. A while back, my wife had given her a small, unused makeup bag. One summer night, I caught her whispering into the makeup bag right before bedtime. I asked her who she was talking to. She said she was talking to all the beetles that didn't want to stop being balls. I looked inside. The makeup bag was full of dead pillbugs, at least 30 of them. She had been collecting them and trying to talk them out of their